Welcome back to Hoops HD, everybody. It is Monday, February 26th, exactly 1 week from the start of conference tournament play, and this is our Hoops HD report. I'm your host, Chad Sherwood, joined by David Dorman and John Titel up top, John Sleeker right below me, David Griggs, and joining us back again from Bracketeer.org is Rocco Miller. We've got a lot to get to today, guys. Uh, we're going to take a look here at John Titel's latest bracket here in a minute. Um, Maybe even have time for a blind resume if we can squeeze one in. But before we get to any of that, I think there's this topic I wanted to bring up, and I'm sorry for not cluing you in that we're going to do this, but obviously the topic that's been all over college basketball for a day now since the end of the Duke Wake Forest game is court storming.
It
And
has. I hadn't noticed. Are people talking about this?
Obviously, if you've been living in a box and missed it, at the end when Wake Forest knocked off Duke, the fans stormed the court, and Kyle Filipowski got run into by a fan. I know there's some people that say Filipowski kind of reached out, but the fan was there before the game, and even we weren't even at full zeros yet on the court on it. And Filipowski has injured his, some said knee, I think it's his ankle. Uh, he said he was sore, he's feeling better, and is questionable for tomorrow's game or this week's game. Looks like it's not something very significant in terms of injuries, but it was an injury. Uh, I want to get a few of your takes on what should be done about court storming now. And Rocco, let me start with you on this. Do you think that something needs to be done, especially after Caitlin Clark and now Kyle Filipowski?
I don't know if I'm the right person to ask. So when I was in school, we knocked off Stanford on the last day of the season. They were 26-0. Huge game. Brandon Roy, Nate Robinson, Washington Huskies. It was just an unbelievable win. And running onto the court was one of the greatest thrills of the entire college experience. It was unbelievable. People carried Lorenzo Romar off the court, hugged every player. It was like the greatest day, as a student. So I've always been in the camp of there's got to be a place for it because those memories, you can't replace it. And especially if you're a school like a Wake Forest or somebody that's not going to the tournament every year and it's a huge deal for your school, there's got to be a way to find a happy medium. I understand, like, if in the Wake Forest thing, like, it was, they were out there before, like, so fast, it was crazy. So I get that. And then, two Sundays
It was
ago,
it was too fast. The clock, there was still a second and a half left when they started running on the
yeah,
court.
they were out there. They were on them. Yeah. So 2 Sundays ago, I was in Tampa, the largest crowd ever in Yingling Center history, South Florida. The place is bonkers all game long, even pregame. And they did not let like anybody on the court. It was like they had barricades in front of the student section, security everywhere. And even after FAU was long gone, I thought they would let them out. They didn't let them out. And I didn't think that was cool either because you could tell they all wanted to run out there, but they just physically could not. So I feel like there's got to be a medium between those two extremes. But I do think like there's got to be room for it in some capacity because it is such a thrill and it's fun for the players and coaches as long as there's safety.
I'll tell you, I think there's a couple of things that, in my opinion, that need to be done. Number one, why not tell them, hey, listen, you can come out and celebrate on the court, but you got to give 30 seconds, a minute for everyone to get off the court first. Everyone that wants to leave the court to get off, and then we'll let you come out and celebrate. Second of all, uh, I think that the TV networks are to blame for this as well because they
Yes.
hype it up and they broadcast it.
Oh yeah.
And every time you watch a game, you see a court storming. So if you're at a game, what do you want to do? You want to storm the court. And we're seeing ridiculousness like UNC Wilmington storming the court for a regular season win over College of Charleston. That makes no sense to me these days. It's
Yeah.
not just the huge ones. Go
No,
ahead, Greg. So I know you have
Chad,
your
I think,
thoughts.
well, that was my biggest thought. And one of the things that irked me about the court storming, in addition to Kyle Flapowski's injury, I mean, I think we can all agree that we don't want to see that, was this position that all of the television and the media took over it. And in reality, court stormings, there hasn't been a court storming in the last 30, 40 years that wasn't shown on television. It's objectively good television. They have had games run over and preempted and not cut away to the next game so they can show fans running onto the court. And it is good television. It's exciting. People like I think the schools like it because it's a chance for them to say, hey, look at us and how much fun we're having. And like Rocco said, it is fun. And people watching on TV are thinking, wow, we want to do that. So the idea that like TV is suddenly, oh my God, we got to do something about court storming, at least realize that you're a part of the vehicle that fed that and why it's a normal thing. And it is part of the college basketball culture. Is that the right word? But it's part of it. You see it a couple times a week as early as November.
Yeah, and I know that there's a lot of coaches that are against it from what I've been reading. Big 12 Commissioner Brett Yormark said today that there's a conference call with various conference commissioners scheduled for tomorrow to discuss the issue and what can be done on a NCAA wide issue level, more than a conference by conference level.
Yeah,
Stalika,
and I was just going to
you
say,
had
and
a
there are
quick
certain teams, Duke, Kansas in particular, maybe Arizona, where it happens to them every time they go on the road and lose.
Okay,
Yeah,
Stalika.
sorry. Yeah.
Well, I'll give you a couple examples where it can go right and where it can go wrong. If you want to look at one that's quote unquote done the right way, look at Kansas State and Kansas. Not so much this year because they managed to stay off the court at their coach's urging, but if you look at the year before, they made damn sure that the security got Kansas's team off the floor right away before their fans could celebrate with the K-State players. What you don't want to see, and this is more for under the radar folks, you don't want a situation like New Mexico State and Utah Valley where you not only had fans running on the floor, you had fights between fans on the floor along with New Mexico State players at the time.
Yeah, well, that was a handshake line incident, and that wasn't really a court storm incident.
No,
But that was a nasty one.
The one you're thinking of was a court storming. They ran out there, and there were fights between the students and the players. Yeah.
Real quick, final thought on it. Joby Fortson, who has joined us a little bit late, but he's in here. Joby, last final thought on
I had to watch that North Carolina and finish that took basically a year. Real quick, I agree 100% with what Rocco and everybody's been saying this happy medium. One of the solutions I hope they go with, I hope they don't just go with an all-out ban, which is what I think the pendulum is going to swing, and it's going to be very harsh. But go after, do what the SEC does and others, find the school. If I like Chad, your 30-second minute rule or whatever, if there's a violation, if they don't have that 30, 45 seconds, if someone penetrates the court, find the school. And trust me, the school, Wake Forest, the failure this week was not even the students, dare say, and I think it's BS the students were aiming for Filipowski. That's just narrative from the media that's wrong, and Filipowski's wrong. The students were rushing on. But the administration needed to do a better job. And that's where the failure this weekend was the administration, and money talks in this situation to try to limit it. And that's where the SEC does a good job with this already. The ACC does not have such a rule. If there was some sort of rule coming along, I'd be 100% fine with it, but I don't want an all-out ban.
And if you're saying it's too expensive to hire all that security, make it more expensive to pay the fine.
Then the fines are not expensive; they're a joke.
Bring the fines up. I also like what Joe.
At the SEC, it's $500,000. That's real.
Yeah, I thought it was 25,000. I didn't realize. Okay, $500,000 is not.
Okay,
a joke.
yeah. Real quick, I also just want to quick mention. I did like what Joe Lenardi's suggested, which also take away the student tickets for any kid that does violate, either by getting on the court or maybe by getting on the court too early or the like. But we really do need to move on. This has been killed to death in the media, but I am going to pull up here. John Titel, your latest bracket as of heading into the play Sunday morning. I believe this was your bracket. We've done this for a couple of weeks now, and we want to give, first of all, this is your bracket here as of morning of February 25th. And I know a couple of our panelists here had a few questions for you. Rocco, you're also an expert bracketologist. Maybe you could throw in your comments as well if you agree or don't disagree with what Titel says in response to the questions. But Dorman, I know you had a question for him. I'll let you lead off.
John, you currently have Gonzaga there on the 11 line as an 11 seed, also going as one of the first four to Dayton. Gonzaga plays at St. Mary's this weekend, and then if they were to get to the finals against St. Mary's, let's say they lose both, John, Can Gonzaga make the tournament and lose both these last two games to St. Mary's?
Tough, but let's play it out. So they beat San Francisco Thursday. They lose at St. Mary's Saturday. That puts them at 23-6 and the number 2 seed in the conference tourney. Probably get a rematch with the Dons in the semifinals. Then, as you say, lose to the Gales in the title game. They're 24-7. The predictive metrics love the Zags.
Yeah.
And it would be nice if teams like Syracuse and Yale, who they already beat, made the tourney to put those teams on the board. And if the tier 2 loss to Santa Clara ends up as a tier 1 loss. That's a lot of ifs. I think they're in serious trouble from both a bid thief like a Drake, as well as a power conference team on the bubble like a Butler or Utah, who's going to have many chances for tier 1 wins in the weeks ahead.
Thank you.
Yeah. And Joby, I know you had one too.
Yeah, and John, we were talking about how strong the bubble was just a few weeks ago, and now we are not. Just say a lot. You're seeing, and I'm just going to reel off teams that all look like they're on a downward trajectory right now: Virginia, Butler, Utah, Texas A&M, Ole Miss, Grand Canyon, and from the under the radar conferences, Grand Canyon, Indiana State, and Drake kind of losing to blow their chances maybe at large. Who do you see? The problem is then you go to bracket matrix, and there aren't teams coming up to take it. From your perspective, you mentioned Butler, but they lost, recently. They're on 4-game losing streak. What teams do you think are kind of safe in that, safer, none are safe, but safer in that group? And what teams do you see coming up to step into the breach, so to speak, on the bubble that might be out in a lot of people's lists? Is South Florida one of those that no longer would be an at-large, for instance?
So if I had to pick a safest team, I guess I would go with the Lopes. They're 24-4. All 4 losses are away from home. All 4 losses by 7 or less. They're like very close to being perfect or at least fantastic. They're pretty healthy as well. All 5 starters have started every single game. They also have experience: 2 senior starters, 2 junior starters. The good news, they're probably not going to have to face Charlton State again until the title game, if at all. And they have a coach in Bryce Drew who's won 23 or more games for 3 straight years in a row. So if I had to pick a safest, I'm going with Lopes. As far as a team who would fill the void, I would go with the Qs. I was going to get to them during the ACC, but I think they're a good answer here, so I'll do it here. First-year coach, you know how I love those guys. Adrian Autry started 10-3. It's been on a roller coaster since then. No winning streak more than 2 games. No losing streak more than 2 games. They're 18-10. They already have the signature win when they beat the Tar Heels a couple weeks ago. They got a pair of winnable home games this week. They host Va Tech and they go to Louisville. They're probably going to lose at Clemson next week and finish 20-11. And then maybe they get an 8-9 game against an NC State team who they already swept this year to get them to 21-11. Then they rematch with the Tar Heels, who they already beat, and then maybe beat them and then lose to a Wake team who scored 99 against them earlier this month. Finish 22-12 with that 2 wins over the Carolina. Maybe the last team in, maybe.
Rocco, what do you think about that? About the comment that Titel just made? Did you kind of like the idea of Syracuse, maybe a team that could sneak in here late, and that Grand Canyon might be one of the safer teams here among the teams that are hovering around that bubble?
Well, I think, yeah, with Syracuse, the good news for them is their resume scores are still pretty strong, surprising or not, top 45 in both KPI and strength of resume, but their performance stuff is off the charts bad. 85 and Ken Palm 99 in BPI. And the more important thing is, who did you beat, where, and how? Their only win against the field right now is North Carolina at home. It's a great win, but it's a home win. They have nothing else against the field. So they just have a lot of ground to make up in that regard. And they've had losses to Tennessee, Carolina, Duke, Gonzaga, Wake Forest, Clemson, and Virginia. So they're 1-7 against the field, with 3 more losses on top of that outside of quad 2 and 3. So I just think Syracuse is too far out to play in. And then in terms of Grand Canyon, I would also say for them to be in at large, they're going to have to lose a 5th game. They've already got 3 road losses in the WAC. And I don't know, it might just be a little too much to overcome for the Lopes. I hope I'm wrong, because I love them too, John. I think they're capable of actually winning a couple games in the tournament, when and if they get there. I think just to add to the ACC puzzle, the team I do think might have a path, again, is Pittsburgh, mainly because Because Pittsburgh's already got wins at Duke and at Virginia. Now the win over Wake, it gives them a third win against the field suddenly, now that Wake's probably sneaking in. And they get a game at Clemson this week. So if they've got to win that game at Clemson. I don't think there's a way in without that because they have the 344th ranked schedule, which is god awful. So they got to get clearly in. And I think the only way to do that is a win at Clemson. But if they win that game, we can seriously look at Pittsburgh.
Let's throw one more question at you, Tytel. This is one that was in the notes. I don't know if this was my question or Griggs' question, but South Florida. I think Joey mentioned them as well. And I've said this a few times. Where do you stand on them, especially if they do win their last couple of regular season games here, make a run to that American title game at 3:30 on Selection Sunday, and lose there to a team like a Florida Atlantic, who's already in the field probably at that point?
So the fact that we're even talking about a team with tier 4 home losses to Central Michigan and Maine, making it as an at-large is ridiculous. Then again, a team with tier 4 home losses to Central Michigan and Maine, they might win 26 games, which is amazing. Very odd resume. No tier 1 win or tier 1 loss at the moment. If FAU slips to the 4 seed, which is very possible, and then loses to the Bulls in the semifinals, that would make them undefeated against the board, which is also amazing. But if the Owls remain a 2 or 3 seed, then South Florida might not face another team in the field before actually making the field itself. The strength of schedule is bad. The non-conference strength of schedule is atrocious. That being said, I don't see how you can leave out a top 20 team who's won 24 of its final 26 games.
Yeah, that's fascinating because they did crack the polls today, and if they do go undefeated these next 2 weeks, they should be probably in the top 20.
They're so hard to forecast because while they look good, and I think they look good because they are good. I think they look like an NCAA tournament team. Their paper isn't good, but the statement "you are what your profile is" true 98% of the time. I think this is one of the 2% that it isn't. And I know that we've been talking about this via text and on the email. What are the NABC advisors saying about them, and how much is the committee listening?
And that's what I'll tell you what, Griggs. That is one of the.
And there's no way to know that.
That is the only question. That's the only thing in this workbooks that we use here, for example. That's the only thing I can't replicate it here is what are the NABC?
There's no way to do it. How would you do it unless you're on the phone?
Yeah, I guess we could start calling the NABC advisors, see if they'll talk to us. But let's jump over.
We got Rocco working on that.
Let's jump over to a real quick blind resume here. Let me go a couple pages here. Let me start with Dorman, and they'll go to Stalika on these two teams real quickly. Left or right here? A couple blind resumes. Who do you like better, left or right? Real quick.
Oh, real quick. I'm going left just because of what they tried to do out of conference and the strength of schedule. 45 on the left versus one of the worst in the country, 344 on the right. Just because you tried to schedule those tough games, I give you the slight nod there. I'm going left.
Stalika, what about you? You agree with him?
I'm looking at the team on the left. Yes, they've got a good strength of schedule. That record of 17-11, I'm not really liking that one. Now, I can probably tell just by the fact that there was not like a tier 3 loss. I don't think that's not Michigan State. That much I can tell you right now. But I look at the team on the right, their predictives are rather iffy. The ones on the left are going to be far better. And yeah, I look at that non-conference strength of schedule of 344. I'm almost positive that is Pittsburgh on the right. I can tell you that one.
Definitely Michigan State on the left. I didn't get Pitt, but I definitely got Michigan State.
You guys just nailed the two teams, so no one need to go much further here. It is Michigan State and Pitt. It's Sleek. I wanted to call you out of this Michigan State because you bashed them in some emails and in a bracket you did. And Tytel, I don't think this Michigan State team is out of the field at the moment. I just look at all those metrics, and they, despite 11 losses, aren't they still there?
They are. I think they're going to lose at Purdue. I think they're going to win at Indiana, and then the Northwestern game's a coin flip, and then the Big Ten tourney's a coin flip. But losing to the Buckeyes did not help one bit, obviously. But I would not give up on Tom Izzo in March because he always delivers, it seems like.
Yeah, and this was one of the stories that I bring up the Big Ten standings. The stories of this week was in the Big Ten at least was Michigan State's week here. And Rocco, let me ask you about this team pair of home losses, which is not what you wanted to non-tournament teams, which is not what you're supposed to do in February, is it?
Absolutely not. And I thought they were okay with the first one, but now with two, it's dicey because that's 4 overall home losses for Michigan State. And if you believe James Madison's not at large worthy, that's 3 of them against non-tournament teams. And then you also have a 4-7 road neutral record. So no matter where Michigan State's playing basketball, there's sketchiness all over the board now. The good news, obviously, is they perform as a top 25 team. They've got the Baylor win on a neutral court, home Illinois, and the Indiana State game, if you count that as a tournament level win. But they're 3-8 overall against tournament teams. They have losing records in every category, so there's enough reason now to potentially leave them out, and that's not a good place to be if you're the Spartans. I agree with Titel. I think no matter how they do it, they got to go at least 2-1, and obviously if one of those is at Purdue, they're clearly in. So assuming it's Northwestern and Indiana, I think that's enough to get them in. But I think if they just beat Indiana and lose the other 2, they're probably out.
If you're talking about the neutral court game against Baylor, that was a de facto home crowd because I was played at Little Caesars in Detroit. So definitely a partisan Spartan crowd there.
Joby, as far as the rest of this conference goes here, it wasn't many other storylines other than Michigan State this week. But is there still a room for a 7th team from this Minnesota, Iowa group here? A few others that could make a run at the field.
I was thinking Titel would actually pick Iowa instead of Pitt on the team that could be going because of what Iowa's doing. And now Iowa, they beat Sparty, they beat Wisconsin. That they have a Seton Hall out of conference. I think Iowa is starting to put stuff together in a pretty respectable way. As these other teams fall, if you continue to see Texas A&M and Butler and all these other teams fall apart, I think Iowa can fill the breach. And if you see, they need, like Michigan State, they need to go 2-1, and because one of those 2 will be against a tournament level team. But they have the opportunities, and the way they're playing, I wouldn't put it past them. Of course, after I say this, watch them lose to Penn State at home, and
a nice win for Purdue at home over Michigan yesterday, in case you missed it.
There are a couple of really fascinating games in this conference coming up. Maybe not so much the games during the week this week, although Northwestern a bit of a road test at Maryland there. But Michigan State, Purdue, Illinois, Wisconsin on Saturday, Griggs is a pair, 2 of the better games coming up this weekend.
Yeah, I don't know how good of a game Michigan State at Purdue is going to be.
If you look at the way Purdue has been struggling with everybody they play, they win a lot of games. They keep teams in there.
Yeah, well, that's fair. But they did go to Michigan and they brought all their fans with them since Michigan didn't bring any of theirs this past weekend. That was pretty.
Well, Michigan had, I think, 6 scholarship players for the game also. So come on.
Just rough year for the Wolverines.
Also keep an eye on this Iowa at Northwestern game, another one Saturday, and maybe this Nebraska Ohio State game Thursday night as well.
Yeah, and Ohio State coming to life all of a sudden. I mean, they're still way too far away, but I mean, they're playing really well. And Nebraska, not the best road team, but I think that Iowa Northwestern game, as far as how pivotal it is the biggest one.
The funny thing is
go ahead, Marco.
For Nebraska, they finished with Rutgers, Ohio State, Michigan before the season. You'd be like, oh, that's a brutal finish. Now they're playing the 3 bottom feeders in the league.
Okay.
Sorry.
Let's jump over. Yeah, no problem. Let's jump over to the Big 12 conference where we still have one more game that's going on.
I got a hot take here, Chad. I think Houston is pretty good.
Dorman, what do you think about Houston and that great overtime win on Saturday? Just a real fun game at Baylor, and here they are now, the number 1 team in the nation after UConn slipped up earlier.
They're fantastic. They're just unbelievable. The defense is just swarming, and when you are trying to prepare for a team like Houston. Like it's you can't do that. You can't do anything in practice unless you want to put 6-7 guys out there to emulate what you're going to see against Houston's defense. They're just that strong, and they rebound and they work, and their deflections, and they're in the passing lane. They're all over you on defense. The one concern I have are offensive droughts. You can't go in a 5-6 minute offensive drought in the tournament. You put yourself in a bad place. But I love this Cougar team. I think they're all the part. I think they deserve to be on this top line. But even one overall, it's going to take an incredible effort in the tournament to beat this Houston team.
Maybe it's about cutting the team a little bit lower down here. And Rocco, let me ask you about this BYU team. I discussed them last week as well, but I want to get your take on it. When I watch them, I don't love them. I kind of hate them, actually. I thought they proved me wrong last week with the Baylor win, but then they turn around and they lose a game at K-State over the weekend. So I think they proved me right again. So I get they're a tournament team, but are they a good team?
Yeah, it's hard to say. Playing these Big 12 road games and being the team on the extreme far west of the conference footprint creates bigger, I think, road disadvantages for them and bigger home court advantages. So you get the give and take, and that's how you've seen their season play out. They're just 1-6 in games against the top two quadrants on the road, and the only win was at UCF, which is a non-tournament team, of course. So they've yet to beat one of the several Big 12 tournament teams on the road, and even Kansas State, a team trying to recover from bubble out land into bubble inland. That was a team that they might be able to hang with or beat. They beat them at home, and that was pretty much all K-State. So I agree. I think some of those early season metrics are really starting to settle down, getting closer to 20, and their resume is more in the 30s now. So BYU might land as like an 8-9 team, and if you're an opposing coach, you might be happy with that draw.
Still, you mentioned K-State. I got K-State up there on the right. Well, what do you think of this K-State team, especially with you don't get real points for winning a game over West Virginia at home. They did find the game to get a way to get the win tonight. Amazingly, have now won 12 straight OT games. Look at all those OTWs on all the way down to quad 4, multiples of them, but they win games in overtime for some reason.
That's got to be one of the luckier teams in that they've won 7 games in overtime, not lost a single one. Still, the big concern is when you look at both road and neutral, they're going to be a combined 3-8, and your best win away from, well, you got 2 decent wins away from home. Providence on a neutral court is still pretty good at LSU, which not everyone has been able to do this year. However, by not cashing in at a team like Oklahoma State, that's going to hurt. And now you look at games like Cincinnati and Kansas left, you better pick one of those off if you're going to be serious about moving up the board.
Well, what if you go 2-1 in these last 3 games, given what they are at Cincinnati, at Kansas, home Iowa State?
I would probably give them a look, but if you do that, you're still going to need to win another 1 or 2 in the Big 12 tournament in Kansas City, which is going to be another meat grinder.
Griggs, you had a comment also, or no?
Oh, basically, I was just echoing what he was saying.
One other game I want to briefly discuss here.
I would have said it better, but he already get him instead.
Griggs, we had the final regular season Bedlam game, perhaps ever. Hopefully not ever, but at least for a long time. And it was a hell of a game to end Bedlam, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a typical game, and you look back at that series and how many of them came down to some crazy shot or crazy circumstance and overtime. And the storyline going into it was not the best. Oklahoma sort of hovering around the bubble and Oklahoma State nowhere near it. But despite that, to see that atmosphere, that kind of game, I know we got to move on, but I mean, as a fan of the sport, and I realize that when Kansas and Missouri, while it's back, it's not the same. Also quit playing. It's just one that you never thought you'd see come to an end. And I think as a fan of the sport, don't you hate that? And they're not playing in anything. No football, no softball, nothing. It's just done.
I'm sitting here, Joby, highlighting the entire next week almost in the Big Pac-12 conference, including, I guess, it's going to be highlighted. Baylor TCU games going on right now as well. It's still, we look at these upcoming schedules, and they're just amazing in this conference.
And Cincinnati's not that far off the bubble. They are out, but that you can highlight.
Let's go ahead. Let's do them all. Yep.
All right, I'll see you guys next week.
I mean, yeah. What a great conference! And this raises all boats. This conference is cruising towards at least 9 right now in the field, and we'll see how the season turns out for those teams like a Kansas State who do need to fight their way in. But as Rocco often says, they have the opportunities in front of them in this conference.
Let's jump over to the Pac-12. Titel, I think we got you back with us, hopefully. And I know you may not want to start there, but your Arizona Wildcats did suffer a home loss in a great game, but a home loss to Wazoo on Thursday night.
What a game.
It was. It's a sobering thought. I really thought that Tommy Lloyd was invincible in Tucson, and he's not. But of all the teams to save our season, it was the hated Sun Devils who came through on the back end of the road trip by the Washington schools to upset the Cougars over the weekend, giving us the half-game lead at the moment. I don't know if we're going to win out. I kind of want the Cougars to. I think the stat is that they haven't won a regular season title since 1941 or something insane. So like it'd be a nice thing to give it to them on the way out the door in the Pac-12. But if we have to win the regular season title, I'm certainly not giving the trophy back.
Yeah, and we now have Washington State here. Dorman, I don't really ding Washington State much for that loss at Arizona State because they did just complete the sweep of you and Titel's your Arizona Wildcats, and it was a road game out of back-to-back, was it Thursday, Saturday scenario there?
It's really, this has been the theme of almost the whole year. All these top-ranked teams having huge wins at home, Connecticut, Purdue, going on the road the very next game and losing. It's tough to win on the road in any conference. Washington State happened to do it in Tucson, but I think Washington State's a real strong team. I like Kyle Smith's team. They're athletic. They're good. They're fast. I like the way they play. I think this is a strong team going into the tournament, probably playing their best basketball of the year. They got 3 opponents remaining that are pretty I think they're all at home. I think they'll win at least 2 of them. I think they're in good shape, Washington State, getting ready for the tournament. We'll see how they do in Las Vegas, but Kyle Smith and the Cougars are looking strong and, to me, are almost a lock for the tournament.
Rocco, I'll ask you about the Pac-12 bubble. I pulled both those profiles up, Colorado and Utah, because I think this is the bubble in the Pac-12 right now. If you agree with me, if there's another team you think is there, but what do you do with one or both of these teams? In, out, what?
I have them both out currently. I think Utah's a skosh closer, 4 wins against the field. Another team that benefited from Wake Forest's win over Duke, but again, it's a slight benefit, not a big one. And the big blow to Utah, losing at Colorado, makes them 2-8 in games against the top 2 quads on the road, and 4-9 overall away neutral. So very sketchy road work or lack thereof for the Utes. I think the 4 losses outside of Quad 2B can't cancel out the 4 tournament level wins. It's just not a good profile. Plus, they're now 12-11 in games that matter when you take Quad 4 away. As for Colorado, they only have 1 win against the field. It's that hot Washington State team, but it was in Boulder, and they have up to 4 bad losses as well, if you count 2B and below, and another set of poor road resume metrics. And then Oregon themselves, I would also consider still hanging on. The nice thing for them is they're the only team in the country that can say they won in Pullman this year. And that's a beautiful thing if you're Oregon, because that's your case right now to getting selected. But they also have 4 Quad 2 level road wins, albeit just Washington, USC, and Stanford. 7-7 overall road neutrals, way stronger than Colorado and Utah. But now Oregon, all they have left is they do have the opportunity in Tucson.
At Arizona, yeah.
So I think,
and then they get Colorado and Utah too. Yeah, and they get Colorado, Utah. So yeah,
at home, and those are terrible road teams, as Rocco just got done explaining. They should win 3 of those 4.
So I am thinking Oregon's got the best chance because they have the most opportunity. However, if Colorado or Utah were to win out, a road win at Oregon does matter a little bit for both of them. So they might be in play if any of the 3 can win out. I think all 3 would need to win out. That's the crazy part.
Real quick note here. I do want to give a quick shout out to the Cal Golden Bears. Do you believe that Cal has a legitimate shot right now at a 4 seed and a bye into the quarterfinals in the Pac-12 tournament? We were laughing at some teams for losing to Cal. I don't know that those losses like Oregon just had at Cal are really that awful anymore. Believe it or not.
They're not even really upsets anymore. California. Yeah, I mean they're basically like around a top 100 team at this point, which is crazy to say because they were scratching 300 for years.
Yeah.
What a difference the Mad Dog makes.
Yeah. A loss at Cal is tier 2.
Yep. It's not horrible. It's not horrible.
Yeah.
In fact, a loss at almost the entire conference is quad 2.
2 of the big games this week: Arizona at Arizona State, round 2 of the big rivalry there, and then Oregon at Arizona on Saturday. It's a bubble team at Arizona. We just mentioned that game. But let's, Joby, let's jump over to your conference, the ACC. And while you may not want to discuss it, I want to discuss your Hoos. And, just a eye-gouging loss on Saturday against Carolina.
I mean, it was remarkable. It was like Virginia Tech, except at least the defense showed up. If you could stop Cormac Ryan, who went 5 for 5 from 3, they win the freaking game. 44-42. It was a rock fight. It was, everything. But the fact is, Virginia found themselves down early by about 10. They closed it to 4, then go to 10, close it to 4. The fact of the matter is, this North Carolina team who tonight decided to take Virginia free throw lessons, if you paid attention to the game.
They were awful tonight. Almost lost that
RJ
game.
Davis, who's 90% goes 1 for 2. Baycott, who's 80% goes 0 for 2. It was like, oh my God, it's crazy. But Virginians, if they continue this, they're not going to be in the tournament. They need to win at Boston College, plain and simple. They need to beat Georgia Tech at home. I think if you do that, you're going to clinch a top 4 automatic bye. Thus, you won't get a bad Louisville, Notre Dame type loss. And I think you might skate into Dayton at that point because you do have other metrics, other wins. The resume is good. Win at Duke, hey, this whole thing's, signed, sealed, and delivered. But, you cannot count on that, especially the way they're playing. This Boston College game is going to be huge. Their season is probably in the balance to a degree on that, barring some unforeseen run in Washington, D.C.
Joby, if this continues at this rate, I'm going to buy a Powerball ticket of Virginia's last 6 scores.
44, 42, 40, 27, 16.
But mix in the streak is that ugly win over Wake. Yes, it was ugly, but that was only ugly because Virginia was up 10 and they went 1 for 11 and from the free throw line. So, they did beat Wake and they had controlled the game against Wake for the most part. So they did beat a tournament team in this awful run.
Well, let me ask a quick question. To Tytel, you had Wake in your field, the field we just looked at the top of the show, in fact. Is that home win over Duke enough here, or do they or what more do they need with these last 4 games, in your opinion?
I think they need to not lose at Notre Dame or by hosting Georgia Tech, because those would be bad losses. I think they can afford to lose one of the Virginia Tech and Clemson games. Both would be pushing it. The non-conference strength of schedule is bad. They're a home court hero, which is why I think they actually might beat Clemson. Predictive metrics love them. So, I think they're in good shape, which is not something I would have said a week ago. But, I mean, that win over Duke changes a lot of things. That's why they call it a signature win.
Exactly. Rocco, it was the hole in the Wake profile was, where's that win over a great team? It's there now, even though, as Griggs would say, it was only a home game.
I feel like this is an old car after a shootout. There were a lot of holes, and that just filled one of them. So you got you're talking about a team that's 3-9 away from Winston-Salem, Chad. That's 25% of the time you win, and a team that's 1-7 in their top 8 road games that are all falling in the top 2 quads. The only road win in that section is Boston College, nowhere near a tournament team.
That doesn't even count. It's Boston
Yeah,
College.
and all they have left is Notre Dame and Virginia Tech on the road. So they absolutely have to go at least 1-1. Even 1-1 is gross. 2-0 would help a lot. And then I agree with Titel. I trust Wake at home against anybody. So the home games with GTAC and Clemson, I expect them to get those wins. And again, that'll be a nice tournament level win at the end. But man, I think their season's on the line this week on the road because that's the part they haven't proved.
All right,
Good synopsis.
Perfect. Let's just move on to the upcoming schedule here, Stalika. Here is the upcoming schedule. What are you circling this week besides those road games for Virginia and for Wake that we just discussed?
Ooh, I'd probably also be looking at Clemson right here if they're looking to solidify a protected seed. You better watch out against a Pittsburgh team that's becoming more and more desperate and has shown they can win on the road against the top tier ACC teams, unlike Wake Forest, and they better not swell. Slipping up at Notre Dame, it would probably just cost them at most a protected seed. It's not going to mortally wound them like a Wake Forest, for example.
If you like road wins, you like Pitt. I mean, you're beating basically every single ACC tournament team on the road, and why not add Clemson to that list?
I would have selected him.
Dorman, let me jump over to you here as we move over to the SEC, which was a heck of a week for the Kentucky Wildcats. Can you explain to me what they did this week?
And their week was unbelievable. They go to LSU, they go to Baton Rouge. They're winning most of the game. They give the game away at the end. LSU hits in a scramble play, in a busted play, hits a shot at the buzzer. Kentucky loses. Then Saturday, Alabama, looking for the top seed in the SEC tournament, comes into Rupp, and Kentucky looks like the best team I've ever seen in the world. They were absolutely incredible. They're hitting every shot. Their defense was better than most of the games. I know they gave up 95, but Alabama scores. And they got the stops, though, late first half, early second half, that got them about a 20-point lead, and they never looked back. If Kentucky plays like that on Saturday, they can go to the Final Four. If they play like they did in Baton Rouge, they'll be out after the first round.
Let's talk about a couple of these bubble teams also.
Okay.
Go ahead, Griggs. Which
I was going to say, well, Ole Miss and Mississippi State was the one I was looking at.
Okay,
We can start with.
I'll put both Egg Bowl teams up here. Mississippi State, a good week at 2-0 week. Ole Miss, a bad week at 0-2.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way of putting it. Mississippi State getting a much-needed road win at LSU after they had beaten Kentucky. And I know LSU's not a tournament team, but it's still a team that had been playing halfway decent at home. I think that does a lot to strengthen their profile, even though it's a Tier 2 win, just because they had so few of them. Ole Miss, I just don't think they're there. The non-conference strength of schedule smells pretty bad. And while they do have a nice win at Texas A&M is also sort of falling apart. And essentially their whole profile is Mississippi State at home, a win against the Texas A&M road win. I don't want to dismiss it entirely, but to me, it just looks like a weak case. I'd be interested to hear what Titel and Rocco think of both these teams.
Well, yeah, Rocco, Texas A&M there on the right. 4 quad 3 losses now, lost 4 in a row, 10-12 against the top 3 tiers. Is it pretty much time to put the nails in this coffin?
Probably, yeah. I think you look at it, and the bad's pretty much outweighing the good at this point. You got a 10-12 team when you remove quad 4. You've got a team with 6 losses outside of teams in the field. And I get the wins over Iowa State and down in Orlando and the big home wins over Tennessee, Kentucky, and Florida. But they've got a lot of work to do. They end the season with Ole Miss, which would be really interesting, perhaps. And I know they've got a couple other big games still to go. Obviously, if you go 4-0 down the stretch in the SEC, things change in a hurry. So you can't write them off. But that's where I see the Aggies. I think they're pretty clearly out right now.
Yeah, I think the one thing that goes in their favor is those strength of schedule numbers. We compare them to Ole Miss.
Yeah.
10 and 22 non-conference versus 66 and 328. It's completely different worlds, I think. But
Chad, they need to
it's
get their overall record in gear, but I
yeah.
believe if they get
Yeah.
that overall record in gear,
But
especially with the
now with
teams
these
that
four,
they're playing,
these are four. Three of
especially
these
with
four are good teams, though.
yeah, 3 of the 4 are well, 2 of them are in the field right now. One is a fellow bubble team, and another's on the road. They go 3-1. They're sitting at 18 and 13 and get a win, go like 1-1 in the SEC. Given the strength of the bubble, I would not bury the Aggies quite yet. But
Right.
they go 0-2 this week. I'll be the first one to pick up a shovel.
Ty Tuff. If you want to talk about a tough 4 games left, how about Tennessee?
I mean, the thing is that they're already a solid 2 seed, I think, which is to say, even if they lose all 4, like they're not going to fall off the table. But I don't think any team in America has better opportunities than the Volunteers. These 4 are all like tier 1 games, and then they'll probably play at least 2 of them in the SEC tourney after an opening round game against maybe A&M, the team on the right there. I don't think the Vols are going to win out or anything, but like if they win most of their games, they are legitimately in the discussion for a number 1 seed.
Agreed.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
We have a lot of actually really good games this week in the SEC, starting with tomorrow night's Kentucky at Mississippi State game, Auburn, Tennessee, Alabama, Ole Miss, South Carolina at A&M. Should we keep going? Tennessee at Alabama, Mississippi State, Auburn, and Griggs, I know you're watching LSU at Vanderbilt.
LSU Vanderbilt. Yes.
I
Uncle
don't know if anyone else
Buzz
is.
needing to get it together at Georgia, and who else
Yeah.
they got?
Yeah, South Carolina home game. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, if you're looking for a pillow fight, I just want to see if Missouri finally gets off the schneid against Ole Miss on Saturday.
Yeah, Missouri's still looking for that first conference win. Only one of a very small handful of teams in the nation without one. But Sleeka, let me stick with you. You are our Big East guy, and let's pull up the Big East standings here. Where another team that had a heck of a week, UConn, looked pretty bad at Creighton and pretty darn good against Villanova.
Well, I think one of the rather odd texts I got the other night was, when was the last time UConn had beaten a ranked team on the road? It didn't happen against Creighton, but they were able to manhandle a Villanova team that typically doesn't give up a lot of points and plays one of the slowest tempos in the country. So props to the Huskies. I know Zach was hoping that UConn would be able to clinch at least a share, if not outright, for the Big East, but they're going to have to wait another game because Marquette still managed to get a couple wins against DePaul and Xavier during the past week.
Griggs, you have been championing Butler for quite a while now. Are you done with it?
Do we have to discuss that? Yes.
Okay.
I will. I'm done with them in the sense that I just don't think they're going to reach the bubble. I mean, if they win out and then avoid a loss until the semis of the Big East tournament, then maybe we're looking at them pretty closely. I will say that I'm very impressed with what they've done this year, considering what we were expecting out of them, and that the path is still not. It's still open. I don't think they're going to get there. Is that fair? I'm not going to be pushing and championing them like I had been, I don't think.
Well, how about another team, though? Dorman, I just pulled St. John's up there on the right, and we were pretty much a week ago ready to write this team off, and Rick Pitino was screaming about everything under the sun. They win at Georgetown, no big deal. It was only by 5 points also, but then they get that Creighton win in dominant fashion the other night.
Yeah, they were up 10 the whole way, never looked back. The problem with the St. John's schedule now is there's not really many great more wins. There's not many scalps here. The Butler game on the road is basically because you play DePaul and Georgetown to finish, you have to win this Butler game on the road. And then I'm going to say you need to win. You're at home in the Garden for the Big East tournament. I'm going to say you need at least 1, maybe 2. We got to see how the bracket breaks for them. But they have the talent and they're great and they're really good at home. So, you just saw what they did to Creighton at home. Creighton, again, like I said, was off a huge win against Connecticut at home. You go on the road, you lose. It's been the theme of this basketball season. I do think St. John's has the ability and the team and the coaching and the talent to be in this tournament and even win a game or two. But they just struggled they struggled against so many games. The losses are just piling up here, 12 overall. They're going to have to make a run in the next 2 weeks to see their name.
I would say whoever can get above 500 in conference play will likely avoid the 8-9 game, which is going to involve Xavier at this point. I mean, Butler, if they can't beat St. John's, then I would close the book on them because their last 2 games very winnable right now.
Rocco, one more question about this conference. I have Seton Hall and Providence both on the screen. I think last week you had both these teams playing in the first 4 right there. Now both on 3-game winning streaks. Have they moved above that level for you?
Yeah, I still have Providence in the first 4. They didn't play this weekend, so nothing changed
Okay.
since Friday at least. Seton Hall's starting to win a little bit more on the comparisons. I've got them to a pretty safe 10. I think they're my highest 10 today. So Seton Hall, they're now at a point where they actually have a winning record against teams besides Quad 4. And, you know, the individual wins are really nice for them with wins at Providence, St. John's, and Butler. Basically, the fellow bubble teams minus Villanova, they've got road wins against all of them. So it really kind of makes it easy for the committee to say, all right, these guys not only did that, but they beat UConn and Marquette at home. Really kind of the clear choice of all the Big East bubbles. And, you know, you start comparing them to Virginia, Nevada, Boise State. I like them above those 3 right now as well.
One last thing real quick. Titel, I got Villanova up there on the right. Despite the loss at UConn, is there still a path for this team?
There's a path for everybody because if you can beat UConn and Marquette in the
conference tournament,
Tier 1A, but it's a winding and long path, Chad.
Well, okay. Mississippi Valley does not have a path. They cannot make the SWAC tournament. Quick look at the upcoming games this week. Providence is at Marquette at a big one Wednesday night, along with Seton Hall at Creighton. St. John's has that road game. Then Marquette at Creighton on Saturday. So we got a lot of good games here. Seton Hall at UConn on Sunday. That is, UConn lost that game at Seton Hall, so a bit of a revenge factor here for the Huskies too.
And Chad, I think the problem this conference has, if you just look at it full over, is overall record issues. If just one of those 15-12, 16-12, 16-12 teams had won one more game and lost one less, I think that particular team would look a lot better. And hey, St. John's, Butler, that's in a lot of ways a playing game. The loser of that is in deep trouble because they're going to have an overall record that at a minimum, barring the auto, will have 14 losses, and they're not good enough with 14 losses. So it's just the toughness of trying to get the old-fashioned thing. You got to win the games. And that's what these Big East teams on the bubble need to do more than even when you look at some of these other conferences where those similarly rated teams have 18, 19 wins versus 10 losses.
Griggs, Mountain West time. I know Joby doesn't want to discuss it. So, Joby, you really don't want to know that Sleeka thinks that the 7 Mountain West teams belong in the tournament now, not only 6. I won't
How about
even go there.
UNLV just a game out of first place all of a sudden? Really
That's what I was going to ask you.
list.
Look at these standings. You have 5 teams within a game of each other in the loss column now, and
Yeah. Oh, it's just
what a crazy finish. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just been a great year, and I think that you know the foundation, you can see it right there at the foundation is what's pushing everybody forward over time. You've got Tim Miles at San Jose State, and that is just elevating the entire league.
All right, I have a little problem here that the buzzer is not working. We're going to try to get that. There we go. Couldn't get the button to work. As far as the rest of the league goes, though, Rocco, it was a rough week for Colorado State. Losses to New Mexico, and then that loss at UNLV. And suddenly they are the team that is not in the battle for that conference regular season title.
Yeah, they're not. They've been splitting almost every week, Chad. Win one, lose one, win one, lose one. They've been hovering around, and of course have that loss at Wyoming. Was really only the major one. Obviously, UNLV not a tournament team either, so you don't want to collect too many of those. But almost out of real estate, if they can take care of Wyoming and Air Force, I think they can feel very good about making it still. Nevada will give them a nice test tomorrow. Looking forward to that game. But Colorado State, for their own sake, any chances of advancing in the tournament, they really need to start playing a little bit better. They just haven't looked right overall.
Yeah, go ahead and pull up UNLV because
Okay.
If you like losses to Southern, pull up UNLV and Mississippi State.
Or,
And the Air
or
Force
if you
Academy.
or if you like multiple tier 4 losses, there's a few other profiles we could pull up as well. But go ahead, Griggs.
well,
They got 3 of
yeah,
them.
I mean, this is forecasting a little bit, but if they were to if they win their next 3, and I know San Diego State is really good, but they got it at home, and they're 21-10 overall. And what are their metrics going to look like then going into that season finale against Nevada? I mean, it could be quite a buildup.
No.
Joe,
don't-
did you see the,
you don't
did you see the
think-
J&G getting them,
Look at the
getting them
tier
to like
one. They got-
45?
Look at the
Get-
tier
get-
4.
Well, yeah,
Look
but
at the
you,
tier
said,
four.
you yourself said those don't
They
count.
just have, I mean, those 3 tier 4 losses are just a killer for them, even though Southern does have the scalp against Mississippi State as well, as I remember. Yeah, so
And
Southern.
the loss to Air Force should count as 2.
Yeah,
They
I
were-
mean,
they
the
were-
fact of the matter is that the Mountain West, at
True.
some point,
Yeah.
you are going to break down the Mountain West component. The one thing that the committee does look at in the room is, all right, well, what's the net average of your conference? Believe it or not, despite all those high nets at the beginning, which we've discussed ad nauseum, I'm not going to go into it. You've heard it a zillion times. Fact is, they're still 7th. They're not even 6th. They're 7th. And out of all the conferences, behind the Pac-12, behind the much maligned ACC, and it ain't close. I mean, they're way behind. So they're right now, they have 6 teams in because of the way things have broken. I don't see that 7th just because you need a benefit of the doubt situation. Three tier 4 losses does not give you a benefit of the doubt situation.
Titel, they had an injury issue with some of these losses, though, didn't they?
Keelan Boone missed the first 7 games of the season, which includes 4 losses, which are, I believe, the Southern, LMU, Richmond, Florida State, which are 4 of their worst losses all year. I'm not saying that they belong in, but it's because of that. I'm saying that if they can get hot in March, that the committee can say, oh, like when this team is fully healthy, they are one of the best 16 teams in the country because they are.
Oh, Titel starting to make the case for the 7-bid Mountain West.
Yeah.
Joe,
And they're
Joe-
hosting the conference tournament.
Air Force is making a case for an 8-bid.
well, let me go back to that. That was the other big win of the week.
God.
Uh,
My goodness.
Yeah, there you go.
Air Force won at the pit at New Mexico, and Dorman. Is New Mexico suddenly maybe not quite as safe as they had thought? We thought they'd been with that bad loss.
Yes. I think they better finish strong. They really could use one of those road wins at Boise State or Utah State. I think that would put them on. They would feel a lot better going into Selection Sunday if they could get one of these road wins. But I agree with you, Chad. It's getting dicey in the pit area there in New Mexico. Pitino, they got to win the Fresno State game at home, win one of those 2 on the road. The Lobos will feel much better about their chances going to Las Vegas in the Mountain West tournament, where is going to be crazy. Like you just showed us how many of those teams could win or lose. So a win there is going to be tough already. Finish strong.
And let me just make a quick correction. UNLV will not be playing the Mountain West tournament on their home floor. The Mountain West brings in its own special Mountain West tournament court. It'll be their home building, but not on their home floor. We got to get things right here. But the upcoming.
Hey, I made
I
that distinction in my
stand
write-up today.
Yeah.
There's some pretty good games this week, starting tomorrow night with Nevada at Colorado State. We've also got the New Mexico Boise State game here, and Griggs Saturday. It's Wyoming, Colorado State.
Shut it down. That
The
is
premier
big-
game of the Front Range
Oh
Conference.
my God. Yeah. It is going to be off the chain.
2 other questions to get through. 3 other conferences. Let's go through them real quickly over here. We're running low on time, and the Big 12 is not one of them. We already did them.
we discussed them, Chad. We can discuss them again if you'd like.
The West Coast Conference, we saw both Gonzaga and St. Mary's put together perfect weeks, 2-0 weeks. St. Mary's did get a bit of a battle from a pretty good San Francisco team, but I think the bigger question with this conference is what happens this week, because this is probably the defining week for Gonzaga here.
Yeah.
Griggs, go ahead. They've got not only Saturday
Well,
at St. Mary's, but they got to go to San Francisco before that.
right. And
And
let's
Rocco's going to be
pull,
at both games, correct?
yeah, Rocco's going to be at both games. And
Neither
if you pull
one.
up both those profiles, San Francisco and St. Mary's, and I guess like we should look at Gonzaga too, but like, these are two teams. There's San Francisco. That's 14-1 at home. They're not a tournament team. I don't think any of us are saying that they are, but what I am saying is that would be a game that the committee would give Gonzaga a lot of credit for winning. And right now, Gonzaga needs to win a game that the committee will give them a lot of credit for winning. I think if they win these two, and again, we'll have to talk to Rocco and Titel, who are the experts, that will get that's enough. That Gonzaga will be in if they win these two.
Rocco, Titel, either one of you?
Yeah, I think it's an interesting case. Obviously, Gonzaga's got this wild profile with the big win at Rupp Arena. Kentucky playing better only helps them, obviously. But this week, I don't think they can lose both. I think if they split them, they're almost in the same spot. Especially if it's a win over San Francisco and a loss to St. Mary's. Yeah, it'll be an incremental growth actually if they lose to San Francisco and turn around and beat St. Mary's because it's just a bigger win. But yeah, I'll digress there. I just think in general, on the court, I'm honestly not sold on Gonzaga. I saw them lose to Santa Clara. They look very average. I've seen them look very average in a bunch of games. The San Francisco game last time they played in the Kennel was tit for tat for 35 minutes, and then Gonzaga pulled away at the very end, but it was tied with 5 to go.
Yeah, it was.
It's going to be a great game Thursday. I can't wait for it. I know the Dons are fired up. And if you guys didn't know, it's in the Chase Center. So the Dons have played their final Hilltop game now. That was the Saturday win over Pepperdine.
I did not know that, by the way. But okay.
Real quick, over to the American where we discussed South Florida earlier in the show.
I'm surprised they do that, frankly.
Yeah, it's a money move, but I'm a little pissed too because the Hilltop being loud is awesome, and they miss out on that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, they do.
Dorman, over in the American, the story this week may have actually been Memphis. Took care of a pretty good Charlotte team and then beat Florida Atlantic. But is it too little too late for the Tigers?
Yes, Chad, it is. It's too little and it's too late. It's you're going to need a move in the conference tournament to the finals, and you're going to need to win that game. They've just piled up too many losses. The Tier 4 to Rice. The at Tulane. I'm surprised that South Florida at home is still a Tier 3, maybe moving up, but it's just they've compiled too many losses, and it losses at the wrong time. Penny's been frustrated. He's been screaming at the media, but they just don't look like a tournament team to me, in fact. And they do have the talent, though. Once this conference tournament starts, they'll be confident. It's a confident and it's a talented group. So, a run to the conference championship would not be that out of the story here, because Memphis definitely has the pieces to make a run.
Well, Titel, what would you do with this Memphis team if they do make that run? Let's say they win these last 3 regular season games as well. They would then have beaten, and let's say they get Florida Atlantic in the semifinals, not the finals. They lose to South Florida in the finals. You now beat FAU 3 times on the season. Isn't that at least an interesting case?
Very interesting, Chad. If I had told you at the start of the season that Memphis would beat the Owls 3 times, you would say, well, they're a 2 seed probably or something insane. Obviously, it has not gone well for them. Rice loss inexcusable. I agree with Doran. South Florida loss has to come up. That's insane too. Intriguing, Chad, and maybe, but I think the too little too late is accurate, but hard to see beating FAU 3 times and not making it. That's amazing.
And how safe is FAU now, Rocco? Let me ask you about them, because they do have, here's another team, multiple quad 4 losses.
Yeah, that just flipped with the Bryant move to 163. But yeah, I think in general, Florida Atlantic should be okay. They've played a national schedule, which obviously is going to get you a few more losses in general. And the big win over Arizona is just really standing out, of course, in the area that they're being evaluated in the bracket, 8 to 9 seed area. So for today, they're totally okay in my book, but they have a home game against a really struggling Tulane team coming up. They got to just go out and take care of that one. That would be the last chance for a really bad loss, because then they go to North Texas and host Memphis in the last two, and I wouldn't consider those completely atrocious losses if they lost either one. So I think a 2-1 finish, and they should be safe.
Here's the key games coming up this week. Also mentioned South Florida is at Charlotte. This is really just a game for the South Florida team.
Yeah.
A lot of heat
yeah.
after that first matchup. That game was incredible.
Real quick, go over to the A10, Stalika, where Dayton.
Oh my goodness.
They lost.
Well, I think as our colleague Mike Cha pointed out last Thursday, they are 0-3 in the Commonwealth of Virginia when to take into account losses against Richmond, VCU, and now the George Mason Patriots. So the Flyers' loss is now the Spiders and the Ramblers' gain.
Dayton goes to Chicago to play Loyola Friday night in a
That
huge
is not
one.
easy. That is
No,
not
it
easy at all.
This Loyola team suddenly getting votes in both of the top 25 polls, believe it or not, as well. Griggs, that might be a little bit of an overreaction by some of these. But seven wins in a row, you know?
Yeah, I kind of think it is. I love how they're playing. I don't think they're one of the 25 best teams. I can't imagine voting them that high. But I do like how they're playing.
Yeah, the upcoming schedule here, the key games are Dayton's games still. They're hosting Davidson and then at Loyola, as we mentioned. You may want to take a look at Richmond. They're at St. Louis and hosting VCU. That's a pretty good rivalry, that VCU-Richmond game as well. So that's another one to circle on Saturday.
But Loyola can't be overlooking the Bonnies either.
On that note, though, let's jump over to final thoughts. And actually, I'm going to start with Titel because you need the screen share. So Titel, you're up first on final thoughts.
We are going to go back to the Big East and discuss Baylor Shireman. So I want to give him some props. The fifth-year senior became the third player in D1 history with 2,000 points, 1,000 rebounds, 500 assists, joining a very odd little trio of Danny Ferry and John Conchar. So Ferry, 6'10 forward, 4 years at a blue blood school known as Duke. Conchar, 6'5 guard, spent 4 years at Purdue Fort Wayne. Shireman, 6'6 guard, 3 years at South Dakota State, and then transferred to Creighton. When you add in the fact that he's also made 300 threes, which neither of the other two guys did, it's ridiculous. But, like, you can argue that he's one of the best all-around offensive players of the 21st century, but his defense is, shall we say, lacking.
Joby.
Interesting that 4 teams we discussed as, think about them for the tournament, have one big issue. Those teams are Memphis, South Florida, UNLV, and Syracuse. All 4 were mentioned as, maybe these are teams that could, really do something. All of them have nets above 75. Some of them, like South Florida, are in the 80s. That is going to be a big negative. They are going to have to improve on each of them. Syracuse playing the ACC will have some opportunities. The others don't necessarily have the same opportunities because their schedules do not provide those options. Memphis has at Florida Atlantic. So what you have to watch is these teams not only winning their games down the stretch to try to put themselves in position, but winning them impressively to get that net back up, because the committee has only once taken a team either with an RPI or a net above 75. And that was Chad's Rutgers team from a few years ago, who had a bevy, and I'm talking a bevy of Q1 wins, including against protected seeds, which these 4 teams at present don't really.
Absolutely. Dorman.
Yeah, this has been discussed between a bunch of us offline, but I want to bring it out here. The committee needs to make sure these games in championship week count and matter. I know they say it's 1/30th of a resume, and a bunch of years ago they got rid of on the team sheets the last 10. But how you are playing down the stretch has got to matter. How you finish in your conference tournament has got to matter. There's so many teams that are sitting right on the cut line in these major conferences that this has to be a fluid situation. Chad brought up the American in this late Sunday television window. They have to have contingency brackets. There's too much technology in the room not to be prepared no matter what goes down on Sunday or late Saturday. These games have got to count. I've seen it where the Big Ten final is totally irrelevant, didn't even matter. Or someone got knocked out on Thursday in the Big East and it wasn't even thought about. They were thrown in the bracket on the 9 seed. These games are really important, and championship week is really how you look, is how you're playing now. This is the tournament. Tournament starts in 4 days. These games and how your team is putting together really needs to matter. I really want the committee to focus on what's going on championship week. Don't make it too important. I'm not saying it's everything, but it's got to matter in that bracket that comes out that you publish on CBS Sunday night.
And actually, and it's going to be a game against, especially the championship games against some of the top teams in the nation too. It's not just 130. It counts more than your game against Mississippi Valley. A little bit more.
Absolutely.
Rocco.
I'd like to call out the Texas Longhorns. They've been somehow dodging. I did a show earlier today, and they've somehow dodged all the conversation so far. So I got to call them out. They're my last team outside of Dayton, so whatever you call that, on the 11 line, and so the 5th team in, 15 last in. So the Longhorns right now are 3-8 against tournament level competition, and of course those road wins are nice at TCU and Oklahoma and Cincinnati. Cincinnati not a tournament team anymore at this point. Oklahoma, TCU, good road wins, but middle of the pack in the seed list, still not like that strong oomph. And then you look at their record when you take away all those quad 4 wins, and they're just 8-10. I mean, there's some serious yellow to reddish flags on the Longhorns. Their next game is at Texas Tech tomorrow, a game they're probably picked to lose. And if they do, they'll fall to 8-11. They're really getting to a situation where it's they might not have enough wins to get in, but they'll play Oklahoma State this weekend at home, and then they get Oklahoma at home to finish the year with a big opportunity at Baylor next Monday on Big Monday. So the Longhorns are definitely under the microscope, in my opinion, and a team to watch this week.
Yeah, good point. I think we were remiss in not calling them out during the Big 12 portion. Thank you for bringing that up. Salika.
I do want to segue a little bit from what Dorman was talking about as far as the selection committee goes. I just want to highlight 2 gentlemen who will be joining the committee starting next year. One is going to be AD Chad Wayberg, who is the AD at Oklahoma State. And also we have current WAC commissioner Brian Thornton, who started his career as a student athlete or player, shall we say, for Kevin Stallings at Vanderbilt, transfers to Xavier, gets his degree there. And he also was an assistant coach for like 6 or 7 different schools. So he has definitely been around the block as both a player, coach, and an administrator. So I will be excited to see what kind of perspective he brings to the selection committee for the next 5 years.
Yes, they were both announced today. One more thing that we're remiss in was announced today as well. UMass, we discussed them in the A10.
Yeah.
They'll be around for next season. After that, but the season after, they're on the way to the Mid-American in all sports other than
So they'll be
all
under
sports
the radar.
that week. Yeah,
They're going under the radar.
Yes.
The A10 has been almost under the radar most years anyhow. But
Yeah.
Griggs, you want to finish the show off?
Most of what would have been my final thought we've already touched on. We've touched on the court storming. We've touched on the end of Bedlam. Something that I was just sort of realizing, a little bit of an announcement. This is our last show of the year that will not be followed by a championship week video notebook. So it's been great. It's gone fast, and we're entering probably the while it is the final leg of the season, it's also the most fun, I think. So.
Yep, a week from tonight, actually a week from last night, Sunday night.
From yesterday, yeah.
We'll be starting our video notebooks. We'll talk about that more maybe on Wednesday night during our Under the Radar show. But we are well out of time here. So on behalf of David Dorman, John Deitel, John Sleek in the Center Square,
on Tim Miles if we got time.
David Griggs, maybe, Joey Fortson, Rocco Miller. Check him out at bracketeer.org, at Rocco Miller 8 on X. I'm Chad Sherwood. Thanks for joining us. Talk to you again real soon.